The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., shattering the silence of Marcus Webb's small apartment like a stone through glass. He jolted awake, heart hammering, and reached for his phone with the instinctive panic of a single father. Had something happened at his daughter's sleepover? Was the school calling about an emergency? Hello. His voice came out rough with sleep and fear. There was a long pause, then a man's voice, weakened and trembling. Please, don't hang up. I know it's late. I can't be alone right now. Marcus pulled the phone away to check the number. Unknown. Probably a wrong number, maybe a drunk dial. He should hang up. He had to be at the construction site by 6, and Zoe needed to be picked up by 8. But something in that voice, the raw desperation, the barely concealed terror, made him hesitate. Sir, I think you have the wrong number. I know, the voice said, and Marcus heard what sounded like a suppressed sob. I know I do. My assistant's number is 1 digit off from yours. I meant to call him, but then I heard your voice and I just... God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have bothered you. Marcus sat up fully now, rubbing his eyes. Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone for you? Another pause. No, everyone I could call is paid to be there. My lawyers, my assistants, my board members. They'd come running, but only because I signed their checks. I'm dying, you see, and I just realized I don't have a single person in my life who would sit with me just because they cared. The words hung in the dark room like a confession in a church. Marcus should definitely hang up now. This was bizarre, possibly a scam, and he had enough problems without taking on a stranger's existential crisis in the middle of the night. But he thought of his own father, who died alone in a veterans hospital while Marcus was deployed overseas. He thought of arriving too late, of that empty room, of regrets that still woke him up some nights. What's your name? Marcus asked quietly. Jonathan. Jonathan Pierce. The name was delivered with a hint of expectation, as if Marcus should recognize it. He didn't. Well, Jonathan, I'm Marcus. And I'm awake now anyway, so talk to me. What's going on? For the next hour, Jonathan Pierce, who turned out to be the CEO of Pierce Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country, not that Marcus had ever heard of him, talked. He talked about the pancreatic cancer that had metastasized before anyone caught it, about the doctors who gave him weeks, maybe a month. He talked about his ex-wives, 3 of them, his estranged children, 2 daughters who hadn't spoken to him in years, and the empire he'd built by sacrificing everything else on the altar of success. I have $14 billion, Jonathan said, his laugh bitter and hollow. 14 billion, and I'd give every cent of it for someone to hold my hand right now. Isn't that pathetic? Marcus thought about his own bank account, currently sitting at $347 until payday. He thought about the eviction notice he'd managed to negotiate an extension on, about shopping at the food bank so Zoe could have birthday parties and school field trips and all the normal things kids should have. It's not pathetic, Marcus said. It's human. Money can't buy the things that matter. I learned that the hard way too. You sound young. How could you have learned it the hard way? Marcus smiled in the darkness. I'm 34, and I learned it when my wife died 3 years ago. Leukemia. We had some savings, but it all went to medical bills. I was working 2 jobs, trying to pay for treatments, trying to give her more time. And you know what she told me in the end? That she wished I'd spent less time working and more time just lying next to her, talking about nothing. That the time mattered more than the money ever could. The line went quiet for a moment. I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for yours. Because you're losing yourself, and that's the hardest loss of all. They talked until the sky began to lighten outside Marcus's window. Jonathan asked about Zoe, and Marcus found himself sharing stories about his 7-year-old daughter, her obsession with dinosaurs, her terrible knock-knock jokes, the way she still crawled into his bed during thunderstorms. In return, Jonathan talked about his daughters, Emily and Sarah, about the soccer games he'd missed, the recitals he'd sent assistants to, the graduations he'd attended via video call from business trips. I thought I was building something for them, Jonathan said. But I was really just building walls between us. When Marcus finally said he needed to get ready for work, Jonathan's voice became small again, almost childlike. Would you mind if I called you again? Tonight maybe. Marcus thought about all the reasons he should say no. This was crazy. This man was a stranger. But he also thought about dying alone, about regret, about the simple human need for connection. Yeah, he said. Yeah, you can call me. That night, Jonathan called at 9 p.m. And the night after that. And the night after that. They fell into a rhythm. Marcus would put Zoe to bed, and then he'd settle into his worn armchair with a cup of coffee and talk to a dying billionaire who'd become something like a friend. Jonathan wanted to know everything about Marcus's life. How he'd served in the army, how he'd met his wife Sarah at a USO event, how they'd had Zoe during his last deployment. How Sarah's diagnosis had come just months after he'd transitioned to civilian life, how he'd watched the strongest person he'd ever known slowly fade away. How he was now trying to be both mother and father to a little girl who still sometimes cried for her mama. "You're a good man, Marcus," Jonathan said one night. "Better than I ever was." "You're still here," Marcus replied. "That means you've still got time to be who you want to be." It was on the 8th night of their conversations that Jonathan made an unusual request. "I want to meet you. And Zoe. Would you come see me? I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd like to meet the people I've been talking to all week." Marcus hesitated. Something about keeping this relationship on the phone had felt safe, bounded. Meeting in person would make it real in a different way. "I'll send a car," Jonathan pressed. "Tomorrow's Saturday. Please. I don't have many tomorrows left." The car that arrived the next morning was a black Mercedes that looked like it cost more than Marcus had made in the last 5 years. Zoe was beside herself with excitement, pressing her face against the window as they drove through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached a gated estate that looked like something from a movie. Jonathan Pierce met them at the door himself, waving away the hovering nurse. He was tall, gaunt, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had clearly once been powerful. But his eyes were warm when they landed on Zoe, warmer still when he shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. They spent the day in Jonathan's garden, an enormous space filled with flowers and fountains. Zoe ran between the pathways while Jonathan and Marcus sat on a bench, watching her explore. Jonathan had arranged for lunch to be served outside, sandwiches and fruit and cookies that made Zoe's eyes go wide. "She's beautiful," Jonathan said. "She has your smile. She has her mother's courage," Marcus replied. "I'm just trying not to mess her up too badly." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. "My daughters are coming tomorrow. I called them. Really called them, not through lawyers or assistants. I told them I was dying and that I was sorry and that I wanted to see them." Emily hung up on me. "Sarah said she'd think about it." "That's a start. I've been thinking about what you said. About still having time." Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I've set up a trust fund for Zoe. For her education, her future. Nothing can bring her mother back, but maybe this can give her opportunities." Marcus's hands shook as he took the envelope, then he immediately tried to hand it back. "Jonathan, I can't accept this. I didn't. That's not why I talked to you. I'm not looking for money. I know. That's exactly why I want you to have it. The people who wanted nothing from me all my life, I pushed them away. The people who wanted everything, I let them stay close. I had it backwards." Jonathan closed Marcus's fingers around the envelope. "You gave me something priceless this week. You gave me your time, your stories, your friendship. You asked for nothing. Let me give you this." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. "You gave me something too. You reminded me that it's never too late to change, to reach out, to try to make things right." That evening, as the car took them home, Zoe fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder. He opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was documentation for a trust fund, $2 million for Zoe's future. But there was also a letter, handwritten in shaky script. "Marcus," it read, "in case I don't get the chance to say this in person, thank you for staying with me these nights. Thank you for seeing the person I could be instead of just the person I've been. You didn't have to pick up the phone that first night. You didn't have to keep picking it up. But you did, and you saved me. Not from death. That's coming regardless. But from dying completely alone, completely unloved, completely without hope of redemption. You gave a stranger grace. I'll carry that with me wherever I'm going next. Be well. Take care of that beautiful daughter." And remember, the richest man isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love. You're the richest man I know, Jonathan. Marcus called that night as usual, but the nurse answered. Jonathan had been admitted to the hospital, she said. He was in and out of consciousness. But he'd left instructions that Marcus should be allowed to visit. Marcus found a neighbor to watch Zoe and drove to the hospital. He found Jonathan's room, a private suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Jonathan was asleep, looking impossibly small in the hospital bed. But there were flowers everywhere, and photographs, and two women sitting by the bedside holding their father's hands. They looked up when Marcus entered, and he saw their eyes were red from crying. The older one, Emily, he guessed, stood up. You're Marcus, she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, feeling like an intruder. I can come back. I don't want to intrude on family time. No, Sarah said, standing too. Please stay. He's been asking for you. And we wanted to thank you. The man who called us this week, that was our father. The real one, underneath all the CEO armor. We didn't think we'd ever get to talk to him again. Marcus approached the bed slowly. Jonathan's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw Marcus, he smiled. You came, he whispered. Of course I came. I told you I would. Jonathan's gaze drifted to his daughters, then back to Marcus. You were right. It's not too late. They're here. They forgave me. Can you believe that? Yes, Marcus said, taking Jonathan's other hand, the one his daughters weren't holding. I can believe that. Love has a way of surviving everything else. Jonathan died 3 days later, with his daughters by his side. Marcus attended the funeral, standing in the back of the packed cathedral, watching titans of industry deliver eulogies about Jonathan Pierce's business acumen, his vision, his empire. But afterward, Emily and Sarah found him. He left something else for you, Emily said, handing him another envelope. He recorded it a few days before he died. That night, after Zoe was asleep, Marcus played the video on his laptop. Jonathan appeared on the screen, sitting in his hospital bed, looking directly at the camera. Marcus, he said, if you're watching this, then I'm gone. And that's okay. I'm not afraid anymore. You know why? Because you taught me that a life is measured in moments of connection, not dollars in a bank account. You taught me that it's never too late to say I'm sorry, to reach out, to choose love over pride. I spent my whole life building monuments to my own ego, and in the end, the only thing that mattered was the people I loved and who loved me back. You picked up the phone when a stranger called in the middle of the night. You stayed with me when you had no reason to. You showed me grace and friendship and humanity. That accidental phone call was the best mistake of my life. Thank you for staying with me, Marcus. Thank you for teaching me how to be human again. Tell Zoe she reminds me of my girls when they were young, full of wonder and joy. Tell her to never lose that. And you keep being the man you are. The world needs more people who answer the phone at 2:47 a.m. Who give their time even when they have nothing else to give. You're going to be okay. You and Zoe both. I made sure of that. But more importantly, you were always going to be okay, because you have something I spent billions trying to buy. You have love, and that's everything. Be well, my friend. And thank you for staying with me tonight, and every night. It made all the difference. The screen went dark. Marcus sat in his quiet apartment, tears streaming down his face, and thought about the strange journey of the past few weeks. A wrong number that became a friendship. A dying stranger who became a reminder of what truly matters. He thought about how close he'd come to hanging up that first night, and how different everything would have been if he had. How Jonathan might have died alone and afraid. How Emily and Sarah might never have reconciled with their father. How Zoe's future might have remained uncertain. All because he'd chosen to stay on the line. To give his time to someone who needed it. To see the human being behind the voice, rather than just a stranger to be dismissed. Marcus picked up his phone and looked at Zoe's most recent school photo, her gap-toothed grin filling him with fierce love. Then he walked to her bedroom and watched her sleep for a moment, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. We're going to be okay, sweetheart, he whispered. And somewhere, I think Mr. Pierce is okay too. The next morning, Marcus woke to find that Jonathan's trust fund for Zoe wasn't the only thing he'd left behind. There was also a college scholarship fund established in Sarah Webb's memory, and a foundation dedicated to helping single parents, funded in perpetuity by a significant portion of Jonathan's estate. Marcus had been named to the advisory board, if he was willing. He was willing, because he'd learned something too during those late-night conversations. That connection could happen anywhere, at any time, even at 2:47 a.m. between two people who should have been strangers. That grace extended to others comes back to you in unexpected ways. That the simple act of staying, of being present for another human being in their darkest moment, could change everything. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is answer the phone. Stay on the line. Stay with someone in their moment of need. Stay with them tonight, and let the rest take care of itself.